Hello everyone, welcome to sqadia.com. I'm Hina Khan and today the topic of our lecture is deaths associated with sexual offenses. Now, sexual offenses are basically they're basically laid under the consent of the person to whom they are performed, and so the consent is the mainstay whenever we are talking about the sexual offenses. The victim is usually a female person, and males are also sometimes victimized, but the females are the most reported cases for these sexual offenses. Now, under this lecture, we'll be discussing in the first section, we'll be going through the external findings. Now, the external findings, whenever we get a victimized person and he complains of a sexual offense performed to him, we are going to externally examine the person in detail for the findings related to the sexual offense, or in other words, it's also known as an act of rape. So the external findings, again, I'll emphasize that they have their own importance, they have their own legal constituent, and we are going to discuss that in detail. Now, the mouth and the lips are going to be examined in detail whenever we are externally examining the victim and the assailant as well. There can be a lot of trauma that can occur to the mouth and the lips, depending upon the age of the victim. That is the mainstay over here. The younger victims are really prone to this kind of external findings, and they can be easily bruised, they can be easily abraded, or even lacerations can be found whenever we're going to examine the soft parts, for example, the mouth and the lips of the victim. Thirdly, we'll be discussing the bite marks. Bite marks are again very important, and we can get the DNA findings from that, and they are very important legally. In the second section, we'll be going through the general injuries caused to the victim. In specific, the bruises and the abrasions are discussed over here. And then the hand examination is very important, particularly the nails of the victim, because they can carry the trace evidence and very important evidence such as DNA of the assailant can be collected through the nails and by getting a fine scraping under the nails. Then the general injuries are discussed over here in the second section. Thirdly, we'll be discussing the genital injuries in specific. Obviously, it is a sexual offense and the genitals are at stake over here. The pubic hair are combed and the evidence is saved over here. And then we are going to examine the vulva, labia and the anus of the victim. Any fissures, any lacerations, any cuts, they have to be documented in detail while writing the autopsy report, or even the living victims. We can document all these findings for the vulva, labial, and the anal examinations. And then we are going to move on to the samples of the biological testing. Obviously, the biological samples are of very importance because they have their own significance over here. Whenever we are going to identify the assailant, it is very important to get our hands on the DNA of the person. And then we are going to discuss over here the interiors of the genital organs in detail. We can comment on any kind of abnormal structures or any trauma. If we want to document over here, we can get it in a written state over here. Now, in the fourth and the final section, we'll be discussing the internal examination in detail. Now, the injuries are discussed over here in detail, and we are going to comment on each one of the injury in detail over here. The number of injuries are going to be noted down, and their nature is going to be noted down over here as well. Moving on, we'll be discussing the interpretation of the findings and the tests for the semen. They are also very important. We are going to discuss the homosexual offenses. They are basically legalized in a lot of countries, but still their activity is going to be documented if found any. And buggery, for example, is of significance over here, and they are going to be documented in detail over here. So we are going to discuss all of this in this lecture. I hope you want to learn more about the deaths associated with sexual offenses. So do watch the other sections of this lecture as well.